Hey guys, Flopster here from CarboniteCummins.com, and today I'm going to be changing out a set of shocks on this 2008 Ram 2500. Now, factory shocks usually last about 40,000 miles or so before they have to be replaced. I'm at 128,000 miles and mine are just completely done. So I picked up this nice set of Bilstein 5100 series shocks from Geno's garage. That way we can see if we can get the ride quality back in this truck. So to remove the rear shocks, there are two bolts holding it in. You have one bolted nut here on the bottom, and you have an identical bolted nut way up on the top. So first thing we're going to do is take both of these bolts out and pull this old shock out of place. So with the nuts removed off of our bolts, we can then slide the bolts out and pull our shock out. So after you get the old shocks out, it's time to put the new shocks in. I've already hung the top bolt on this just to hold it in place. But to line these things up, you want to look at the actual Bilstein sticker here. If the sticker's facing upright, then the shock's in the right way. Some people like to put them in boot down, but it's technically backwards for this specific shock. Now to get these things in, you're going to have to compress the shock, which is actually quite hard to do. And then we have to line them up and get this bolt here installed. So just push them upward, slide them back, and slide that bolt in. It's really difficult to get this on camera, so I'm going to pause it for a minute till I get this bolt in, then I'll come back. So I was able to get this bolt back in, and after you got both bolts back in and the nuts started, the last thing to do is tighten all this hardware back down. Now these bolts, both top and bottom, have to be torqued to 100 foot-pounds. So torque this thing down and then repeat this process for the other side. Now the front shock is actually inside the coil spring, so to get the front shock out, we have to take this shock tower out and pull it straight up through the engine bay. So the first thing we need to do is hop up in the engine bay and disconnect that top nut that's on that shock stud. So here we can see the stud for the top of the shock. Now it's not a bad idea to put some oil on this thing before you try to take it off, because it's really difficult to hold it to keep it from spinning. If you have an impact wrench, you definitely want to use it on this. If you do not, there's actually some teeth here on the top where you could put a small wrench on it and then use an open-end wrench to twist that nut off and do it by hand. But by far, the easiest way to do this is with an impact. Now that we have that top nut taken off that shock, we need to lift the truck up by the frame so we can drop the suspension down. It takes all the pressure off of that shock. So put a jack under the frame of the truck somewhere and lift it up till that shock comes free. With the weight taken off of the shock, we can now take out these three nuts that hold the shock tower in. So the one here by the wheel, you're going to have to use a wrench and break this thing loose. The two in the back, you actually go in from the top with an extension and a long socket. So take all three of them out and let's pull that shock tower off. With the three nuts taken out, you can now grab this shock tower and lift it up over the top of the shock and set it back out of the way. Now the driver's side does have the axle vent tube on it, so make sure that when you put this thing back together, it's actually clipped back up where it should be. So the last bolt we have to take out is in this hole right here in the axle just below the spring. It holds the bottom of the shock in. Now on the back side of this, there's a captured nut, so you don't have to hold it with anything. So we'll just reach up in here with our socket and take it out. After we got all the bolts removed, we can now reach down inside the engine compartment and pull this shock out straight through the top. Now we're going to take our new shocks. Make sure that you put the washer and the bushing on it. We'll take this new shock and set it right back down in place. Alright, with the new shock slid down into place, you need to reach up in the spring, line it up, and we'll put this lower bolt back in. Now we need to torque this lower bolt to 100 foot-pounds. After the bottom bolt is secured, we can go and put our shock tower back up on top of the shock. Now this would actually be a little bit easier to do from up in the engine bay, but I can't get any good camera angles from up there, so I'll start here for this and I'll finish up off camera so I can make this thing happen. Once you get all three of these nuts put back on, you want to torque all of them down to 55 foot-pounds. So after we got our shock tower back installed, we now need to put the rubber grommet and the washer over top the stud. So take the rubber grommet, put it in. Make sure that nipple is actually facing down on the upper half. And we're going to cap it with this washer. And then we can install the nut on top of it. Now we need to torque this nut down to 40 foot-pounds. Once you get that shock all tightened down, now all we need to do is let down the truck. Repeat this process for the other side front shock, and that's it. You're done. All 4 shocks now put on the truck.